Good evening. Today is January 11th. The Watchung Board District is committed to inspiring learners to explore, inquire, and collaborate on their joyful journey towards discovery, independent thinking, and creative problem solving. Our culture and acceptance and inclusion provides a foundation for learning and social and emotional growth. Through reflection and ethical decision making, we continue to learn and grow, embrace differences, and prepare for an increasingly complex, ever-changing world. I call to order a regular meeting of the Watchung Borough District Board of Education on January 11th at 7 p.m. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Welcome to the meeting of the Board of Education of the Borough of Watchung. Please be advised that this and all meetings of the board are open to the public and media, consistent with Open Public Meetings Act, Chapter 231, Laws of 1975, and that advance notice required therein has been provided. This is a regular meeting of the Board of Education of the Borough of Watchung, at which formal action may be taken. This meeting will be live streamed on the district website, where a recording of the meeting will also be posted. The public will have an opportunity to be heard as shown on the agenda at points in the meeting provided for the public to address the board. Recording or photographing other than private personal use requires the consent of parents, guardians, for those whose children may be included in the image. Before we get started with our retreat tonight and welcome Gwen Thornton for the State of New Jersey Board Association, I want to notify the public that board member Mr. Richard Buccarelli has resigned from the Board of Education immediately. Rich, thank you for your 4 years of service. I hope to hold the same integrity in my time here, and I wish you the very best in your future endeavors. As per our board and bylaws, number 0143, on behalf of the board, we invite any interested resident to submit a written request and resume for consideration of his or her candidacy for the vacancy. These can be emailed to me or delivered to the Board of Education to my attention. The board will be posting the vacancy to the district website and advertising it to the community with appropriate deadlines. The Board of Education will interview qualified applicants in executive session and will expect to vote to appoint a candidate to the vacancy in public session. There will be no decisions made in executive session. During the public session nomination and voting process, board members must express their opinion in support of their vote so the public can witness any deliberations. Policy formulation and decision-making progress of the board. We expect this vote and appointment of the board new member to take place on February 22nd, 2024, regular board meeting. Karen, roll please.
Mr. Fresh.
Here.
Mr. Gonzalez.
Here.
Mrs. Harvey.
Here.
Mr. Ingracia. Absent. Mrs. Jewett. Here. Mrs. Aguilaro. Here. Mrs. Amadeo. Here. Mrs. Santos.
Here.
At this point, I would like to introduce Mrs. Gwen Thornton of New Jersey Scored Board Association, who will be facilitating our Board of Education training, goal setting, and evaluation of the superintendent discussion this evening. Gwen has been our field service representative for a number of years, and we're happy to have you back with us tonight.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be back. Happy New Year to all of you. Welcome to the new folks who are just elected. It's nice to see you. Please know that we are here as a resource for you always, even if I can't remember every domain name that I need to know. But I will get that to you. So I thought we would start tonight with your annual ethics training as part of New Jersey QSAC, New Jersey Quality Central Accountability Continuum, which is the state's monitoring process for school districts. The Board of Education is required on an annual basis to review the Code of Ethics. I know that you probably read it into the minutes at your reorganization meeting, but it requires a discussion under QSAC, and so that is what I'm here to do. And interestingly enough, even if you've been on the board before, there have been changes as a result of the decisions of the School Ethics Commission that continue to change the landscape in New Jersey around the Code of Ethics. So my goal for tonight, why is this not? I have to do this too. There you go. I almost forgot I have to do this, but I have it up here. Older eyes, I can see it much better here. Okay? So this is really just a disclaimer that talks about the fact that this is informational for you. It does not take the place of the advice of your board's attorney, who is the arbiter of a large number of pieces of this. And if you have specific questions in regard to this, your board's attorney is the person that you will go to for that final information. So, the School Ethics Act was designed to ensure that the conduct of members of local boards of education hold both the respect and the confidence of the people. I have always been very proud as a board member, when I was a board member, and also as a staff member, because we abide by this code of ethics as well, and we enter financial disclosure forms the same way you do. That this was something that originally was voluntary and ascribed to by all. It later became part of statute and is now a requirement of the law, but it was something that actually was approved at the Delegate Assembly, which is the governing body of New Jersey school boards and made up of every school district, which has one representative to that body, who developed this initial code of ethics that later became part of statute. So it means that board members and administrators must avoid conduct that could be a violation or a perception of a violation, and that's important as well. It can be a perception of a violation of the public trust, a justifiable impression that the trust is being violated. So that's an important piece to keep in mind all of the time. Once you become a board member, I frequently say to members of the boards, it's like having a scarlet B on your forehead, as opposed to a scarlet A from the scarlet letter. People in your community know you are board members, and they do imbue you with greater information and knowledge about the educational process in the school district than they assume for anyone else in your community. And so it is a large responsibility. Okay? Once the School Ethics Act was in place, there is a School Ethics Commission. It's called the SEC for brief. I thought that was the Securities Exchange Commission. When I moved back to New Jersey, I quickly found out as a board member it means the School Ethics Commission. It lists prohibited acts around conflicts of interest. It also embodies the mandatory training, which we'll talk about in a few minutes, as well as the requirement for those financial disclosure statements that you must fill out. Okay? The provisions apply to all Board of Education members, as well as charter school members, professional NJSBA staff, such as myself, officers of NJSBA, and administrators who are certificated. Okay? The provisions apply for the Code of Ethics and mandatory training for board members and charter school trustees only. Who enforces this? The SEC is made up of 9 folks. They're appointed for 3-year terms. 2 are school board members, 2 are school administrators, meaning superintendents, and the remaining 5 are non-school officials. The law says because we are nonpartisan as boards of education, not tied to any political party, that there can't be more than 5 people from one registered in one political party that serve on the SEC to ensure that it remains nonpartisan. Its jurisdiction, it issues 2 different and handles 2 different pieces. Advisory opinions, and we'll talk a little bit about that. Any Board of Education member may request an advisory opinion of the School Ethics Commission if you think that you might have a potential conflict moving forward and you wish to get a determination before that vote comes before the body. So advisory opinions are only on a prospective basis. You can't ask for an advisory after you voted and found out it's a conflict. That doesn't work, okay? They also address any ethics complaints that are filed against a Board of Education member, okay? And in any given year, roughly, there are around 85 ethics complaints that are filed, and some are thrown out, some are adjudicated. If there's not just cause, they will throw it out. 35 advisory opinions requested. Interestingly enough, for advisory opinions to be made public, there have to be 6 votes from the SEC to make them public. So, for example, we went for several years in the teens, in the late teens, like 14, 15, and 16, and there were no advisory opinions made public. And they're made public, they strip out all of the names and the name of the school district if they think the SEC, if the commission believes it has such widespread impact for all Board of Education members, they will make that advisory opinion public. There is an expectation on behalf of the School Ethics Commission that you will read those advisory opinions. We publish them in school board notes. If you haven't gotten your first school board notes, you will shortly. We always publish all of the advisory opinions as well as the ethics decisions, because ignorance of what has been determined is not an excuse. Okay? And in fact, there are just a couple that have just recently come out that have had some really widespread impact, and we'll talk about those in a few minutes. Okay? So, also in the Act, mandatory training. Board members in their first year of service, and this would apply to the 3 of you who are brand new, welcome, welcome, welcome. You have 90 days in which to attend new board member orientation. For those of you who are sitting here, who were elected before this year, you had a whole school year, 180 days to take it. Not anymore. The SEC changed the regulations, and they've determined they want new folks to have training within the first 90 days. We applaud that, because the sooner you go to training, the more able you are to fully participate as a Board of Education member and understand what your roles and responsibilities are about. So that's what you have to do in year 1. By the end of year 2, and you have the full year for this, you have to go to Gov 2. Currently, Gov 2 is composed of a module on labor negotiations and school finance and budgeting. Gov 3, you have to take by the end of the 3rd year of your first term, and that is focused solely on student achievement, social emotional learning, mental health supports, climate and culture, all of those wonderful things. I think we should give that to you earlier, but that's my bias as a former educator. Gov 4 must be taken in the first year of any term subsequent to your first. So when you finish 3 years as a board member, of course you have loved it, you run for re-election, you win, then you have to go to Gov 4, and that is legal updates around the School Ethics Commission, changes from labor negotiations and PERC decisions, which is the Public Employees Relations Commission, and all of those other court cases that might have an impact, both at the federal and the state level, on education in New Jersey. Okay? So you also need to know, because this question gets asked every year, well, I'm new and I want to go to all of them. You can. However, you only get credit from the School Ethics Commission for taking it in the year in which it's required. So if you're a new board member this year and you go to Gov 1, you may want to go to Gov 2, you may want to go to Gov 3. You're welcome to attend any of those, but they won't count for the requirement in the year in which it's due. And I always get a board member or two who calls me and says, but Gwen, I went. Yeah, I get it. But it's an SEC rule, not an NJSBA rule that we're following, because they are a state agency connected to the Department of Education. Okay? We are just charged with the training and reporting the training. And you want to make sure you don't wait until the 11th hour. I literally had a board member at 11:43 on December 31st that finished his training. Don't take a chance that the technology will work and that you won't hit a glitch. You can take it virtually, you can take it in person, self-paced, you can do it home in your jammies and sweatpants or whatever with bunny slippers. We don't care how you take it, but it's important that you take it. And the sooner you take it, the more informed you will be as a board member. And that's important. And you also don't want to get hate mail from us, because we'll start papering you with, oh, you're in danger of being out of compliance, and I'll have to call your business administrator, then they'll harass you and we'll harass you. And then if you don't do it, there's a series of escalating penalties for board members who don't complete their training. And it goes up to removal from the board if you fail to take your training. And I'm not trying to scare anybody. I'm just trying to tell you, because it's always like a surprise to folks. Okay? Your disclosure statements, you will get an email from the state. You should have already received it. You have 30 days from the date of reorganization when you were sworn in to complete that document. If you're a returning board member, you have until April the 30th. So you have a little extra time as a new board member, as an experienced board member, to finish your financial disclosure forms, okay? They are available, it comes to you online, you can fill it out. I always tell board members, when I was a board member, this is how old I am, we used to have to fill them out in duplicate. You had to copy it and then sign both originals and deliver it to your business administrator. Now you can do it in the comfort of your home. You hit certification and you're done, and it gets done all electronically. So it's much easier than it used to be. Okay? Penalties. So they have now laid out, if you fail to do your required tests and/or you were found guilty of a violation, the SEC has the ability to reprimand you, which is exactly like it says, don't do it again. Same thing we would say to our kids, right? Don't do that again. They also have the authority to censure a Board of Education member. That's a little more complicated. It includes having a resolution of censure read publicly at a Board of Education meeting and then recorded in the minutes that that was done and posted on the district website for 30 days. They have the authority to suspend a board member for a finite period of time. It's what a suspension is, the same way it is at the high school level, 3 days, 5 days, whatever it is. And they also have the ability to remove a Board of Education member for egregious violations of the Code of Ethics, and they have used that. Okay? I'm not going to take a lot of time because I know you've already written and read this, as well as spoken it at your board meetings, but you are required to enforce and uphold all of the laws and rules of the State Board of Education and court orders, and only bring about change through legal and ethical procedures. That simply means that you are publicly elected officials. You took an oath of office that you swore to uphold, and that includes following all of the laws and regulations of the state of New Jersey, including those that you may or may not agree with. And that's a requirement. You will make decisions in the best interests of all children, recognizing the needs of all students, regardless of their ability, their race, their creed, their sex, or their social standing. So regardless of what your policy says, you as a publicly elected official are required to abide by this and to uphold it. You're required to confine your board action to policymaking, planning, and appraisal, and do so only after you have consulted those who will be affected by them. You are, by definition, a policy-making body. That is one of your major roles as a Board of Education, is to create policies, which are essentially a roadmap, if you will, a guide for your staff, your students, your community members, the Board of Education, your superintendent. And so it is really important that you understand that that means you are not involved in the day-to-day operational aspects of the district. You will hear all New Jersey School Boards Association staff say over and over and over, your role is to see that the district is well run. It is not to run the district. You hire your educational experts and staff to make sure that the district is well run. You will work together, not to administer the schools, but again, with your colleagues and fellow board members to see that they are well run. Keep in mind that no Board of Education member has any authority by themselves. The only time you have any authority in Watchung is when you are seated here at a duly advertised meeting of the Board of Education, when you work together with your colleagues to make determinations around how the district is going to function and move forward, whether it's adoption of a policy, whether it's authorization of a field trip that's been recommended by your superintendent. All of those things can only happen here at the board table. So when this meeting is adjourned and you go out into the community, you have no more authority than I do, and I don't live in Watchung, okay? And that's something that you have to understand. No individual board member has the authority to direct your superintendent to act. Only the full Board of Education has that ability. So it is only when the board collective makes a decision to have the superintendent do X, Y, Z that the superintendent would consider doing X, Y, Z. But none of you by yourselves have any authority. The board president doesn't, the board vice president doesn't, and none of you do either, okay? It is the collective board that has the authority to make change in the district, okay? Again, here it is. The authority rests with the full board, and make no personal promises nor take any private action that might compromise the board. And we will talk a little bit about what does that really look like, what does that mean in reality? Because a lot of this sounds really nice, but oftentimes it's very confusing as to what that means. You are folks responsible for saying what you want to have happen in the district, but you are not the how people. You are not the nuts and bolts people that get in and fix the buses. You are not the people that fix the water fountain. You have no business doing any of that. That's taking personal action that could compromise the board long term, okay? Refusing to surrender your judgment to special interests or partisan political groups, or to use the schools for personal gain or for the gain of friends. Boards of education are nonpartisan. We are elected that way. That's why you're on a separate part of the ballot from all of the other offices that may be on that ballot. But that means that you will not surrender your individual judgment or thinking to partisan political groups with a big P, meaning the parties, Democratic, Republican, and or special interest groups, whether it's the bowling team, whether it's the Madrigal Singers. You're here for all students. And so even if your child sings in the chorus, you have to look at decisions in the interests of all children, regardless of how you might personally feel. Excuse me.
Do you want a water?
Pardon me? No, I
Want
have
a water?
better than water, I have coffee. Kind of stay warm. I just keep thinking of that cold ice water bath. Okay. Holding confidential information that is discussed in exec session could needlessly injure individuals or the schools. And again, you are required to hold confidential executive information in exec session. That means you don't discuss it with your best friend, your neighbor, your husband, your wife. Exec session material does not go beyond the board. And if you do, you risk putting the district in a position that could be detrimental to students, to staff, and needlessly harm folks that you don't want to do. And so you need to make sure that you are not disclosing information that comes to you in exec session until the need for it has passed. There is a process by which materials discussed in executive session become public when the need for confidentiality no longer exists. That will never be true for personnel decisions. It will never be true for student matters, because both of those groups have an inviolate right to privacy that you can't abrogate. But for example, if you're negotiating a contract and the contract is approved and the board signs off on it, that material and information can become public. There's some things that can become public. There are just a few that will never become public. However, there's a process for making that happen so that the public can stay in touch with what's going on in the district. You're required to vote and appoint the best qualified personnel available after consideration of the recommendation of the Chief Administrative Officer. You are not required to vote yes on every personnel recommendation as long as your rationale is not arbitrary or capricious. We can talk about what that means. You know, capricious is, I didn't really like what they wore to meet the board. My neighbor told me they were not a good teacher. That's an arbitrary, capricious decision. You can't have that. You're required to support and protect school personnel in the proper performance of their duties. For those of you who might be sport parents of one kind or another, the day before you became a Board of Education member, you could stand on the sidelines and say, that person is the worst coach I have ever seen because he didn't play your child for enough time. And of course, your child is the next, I don't know who's a great sport, I'm not a big sports person. and I'll say the wrong name, Tom Brady, or, yeah, I'll get in trouble here. I won't say anybody. But, you know, you could do that the day before you became a board member. But the day you became a board member, if the coach is employed by the school district, you can no longer do that. Okay? You have to protect your school personnel and the proper performance of their duties. Okay? You're also required to refer all complaints to the chief school administrator, which is your superintendent, and act on the complaint at a public meeting only after the failure of an administrative solution. Now, failure of an administrative solution does not mean that every parent is going to walk away happy. It means that it was looked at, taken care of, and addressed, because sometimes people believe if they don't get necessarily what they might want or think is appropriate, that's a failure. But it is not up to the board to investigate complaints. It is not up to you to do any of that work or to try to solve someone's individual problem, because you don't have that authority. What you can do, and we'll talk about this, is use the chain of command in order to enable folks in the community to have access to the district. What that means is you want to direct them to the person closest to the issue and ensure that they know and they have spoken to that person first. If you're giving them help, that's how you can help them. If it's a class issue in a classroom, have you spoken to the teacher? If you're not satisfied with the resolution at that level, the next step up the chain of command would be the vice principal or the principal, and so forth and so on until it got to the superintendent. If the Board of Education involves itself in those kinds of issues way down here, when a parent calls and says, you can't believe my little Susie did such and such and they did such and such, you will have to recuse yourself if it ever gets to the board level and not participate. Also keep in mind that most times when people call, it's because they're upset. And like most folks, they may not have the full story or the full picture. For those of you who are parents and have ever had a child come home and tell you a story about something terrible that had happened to them, you know that it's only about 50% of what may have transpired. And oftentimes for people who are upset, it's because they don't have the complete story at their fingertips. So the best thing you can do as a board member is to give them access. Tell them who to call. If it's a transportation issue, you call the transportation office. You know, if it's a athletic issue, you want to start with the coach and then the athletic director if you have one, and work your way up. But you wouldn't start with the superintendent and then work your way backward, okay? So that's the chain of command for the community, and people will call you and reach out when they have an issue or a concern. A lot of members of the public think you might have more authority than you actually have, because you don't have the authority to solve anybody's problems. I also suggest when folks call you and they have an issue, as a courtesy, you should reach out, let the superintendent know, and copy the board president, because that's helpful, and then everyone is in the loop, so that if it does become something that's really critical, they're not hearing it at the 11th hour. Okay? What is your chain of command as a Board of Education member, okay? Again, you know, you should be advised of any issue that is a problem within the district that is going to look like it may end up in something. However, you don't go out to the public and solicit complaints, okay? I know, but sometimes people think, I'll just go out and ask, you know, how is your child doing in this classroom? That's not your job, okay? Again, refer the person to the lowest level in the chain of command, and then notify the superintendent so that it can be addressed if need be. Sometimes it will need to be addressed, and sometimes it'll be handled at the teacher level or the building level, and we'll never go any further than that. And that enables all of your educational leaders to do their work. Okay? So from this particular year, here are some examples, and I'm going to send you this PowerPoint tomorrow, or tonight, so you'll have it tomorrow, so you can read it at your leisure. You know, these are cases that were discussed. A board member copied and pasted info from a board email and sent the non-public contents to township officials that revealed internal executive communications between the board. It was considered confidential and not yet voted on. this board member was found to be in violation and a reprimand was issued. Okay? An email sent from a district account to a known political entity misrepresenting the intent of a rally at the district. It suggested political motivations and only invited one side of the community. Again, using board email can give the impression that the statements were made on behalf of the board. That is taking personal action that compromises the Board of Education. That's something you don't want to have happen. Okay? Here's one where a board member contacted vendors and districts for prices. This is where a board member went beyond his role in oversight and appraisal, developing policy and communications, and was micromanaging the district. It was administering the district by going to vendors, getting prices, and then bringing them back. Okay? It was a private investigation. This individual was censured. Using board email to express personal views on mass mandates and encourage public action, it was sent to the state legislatures and members of the public. This person was reprimanded. It doesn't mean you can't have your own opinion, but discussions of issues within your district should take place right here at the board table, certainly not on social media. Okay? Again, a member accused the superintendent of changing the graduation date due to a personal conflict. She reached out to the chorus teacher to question why, and then again, just created this incredible dust-up and gave the appearance that the board disagreed with the administration and put the chorus teacher in a very uncomfortable situation. Again, it was tantamount to an investigation, referral, not to the superintendent. This board member was censured, and in fact, ultimately, this board member was removed from the board for a whole series of these kinds of incidences. A member should have declined a meeting with the public to discuss a highly divisive board action to change a holiday name because this action undermines the administration's authority to address the concerns and created unnecessary strains on that relationship. That board member was reprimanded. And again, all of these cases and references are going to be available to you in this PowerPoint. You will be able to go and look. You can look at the SEC website. They have all of these cases by year. These are some of the most recent. The day after a board president lost election, he directed the board attorney to conduct research on another board member who had campaigned against him. This was seen as retribution, obviously, and he took private action and used his position as board president to secure privilege for himself that wouldn't be available to any of the rest of you as board members or any members of the public. This individual was censured. In addition to the code itself, there are some prohibited acts. You're required by law to recuse yourself if there is a benefit to you or to your immediate family, if there's a business interest that provides a conflict. You must recuse yourself if you are in a position to secure unwarranted privileges, advantages, or employment. Keep in mind that the SEC has also said this extends beyond your immediate family to others. So for example, if you have an emancipated child that still resides with you in your home and you use your position as a Board of Education member to have them get a position somewhere or another advantage that is greater than anyone else would receive, you have a problem, okay? Any kind of financial involvement that could impair your objectivity. If there's a vendor, for example, or a contractor that you're looking at and you have some kind of personal relationship with them and you can't be objective in determining what's the best way to go, then you should recuse yourself. Please keep in mind, I'm talking about recusals. Recusals are different than abstentions, and we'll talk about what that difference is in a minute. But if you have a conflict under the law that's outlined here, you must recuse yourself, which means you won't participate, you don't discuss, and you don't vote, and you don't sit in the session where that, whatever that topic is that creates that conflict for you, is being discussed, okay? You cannot take any gift or favor that is offered with the intent to influence or any kind of action that would give you financial gain through the district. Okay? So, again, no discussion, no vote. You shouldn't represent any other person or party than the board or districts in matters that may come before the board. This happened in several districts, particularly in the area of special education, where there are special education advocacy groups, where sometimes board members would think they needed to go with a friend's parent, or one of their children's friends' parents, to the IEP conference to help lobby for the services that are needed by that child. That is the kind of thing that you must always avoid, because as a board member, it creates a conflict for your staff and it puts them in an incredibly awkward position because they know that you're Board of Education members, okay? Again, it's not a conflict if you're not accruing something that is greater than anyone else accrues. So I'm often asked, I have a third grader and the whole third grade is going to Lincoln Center. Can I vote on that? Absolutely. The benefit to your child isn't greater than the benefit that every other child in the third grade is going to receive, or in their class, if it's a class trip as opposed to a grade level trip. So those kinds of things you can obviously take advantage of, and you feel free to vote. It is only if it was just your child that was getting that benefit and going to Lincoln Center, okay? Then you would not be able to vote. You should recuse yourself, okay? So, again, when a conflicted board member votes, if it's a legal conflict, recuse. Don't participate in discussion, don't sit at the table, don't vote. If you wish to abstain, then that's okay. Abstention should be used when you don't have enough information to make a decision, or you were absent from, for example, from the board meeting, something was discussed and it's being acted on at the next board meeting and you haven't been able to catch up or get that information to you. Abstention should not be used when there's a hard vote to make. In other words, if there's a controversial issue that comes before the district, sometimes board members will want to abstain, but the public has elected you to represent the best interests of every child in your district, and sometimes that includes making hard decisions. So don't misuse abstentions when something that might cause division in your community or discussion, sometimes you're going to have to do that. Okay? So when we talk about immediate family members, we just talked about that in terms of conflict. It's your spouse, your civil union. I'm not going to read all of these. They have adopted, this was originally in the nepotism policy that you have. We all have nepotism policies in every school district in the state of New Jersey. Originally, when the ethics law was written, immediate family was your spouse, your dependent child who resided in your household, and that was essentially it. They've now expanded it to say spouse, civil union, domestic partner, child, sibling, aunt, uncle, every relative you know and some you don't, in all likelihood. But you need to be aware of that, okay? So, additionally, they have also included others as well. For some, for example, in situations, they decided an other was a board member couldn't vote when they had a divorced spouse and the spouse was employed in the district, and even though they were no longer married under the definition, right, because this person was paying child support for the children in the district, there was this relationship that continued to exist, and so that continued to create a conflict for that individual. So sometimes you have to look beyond just those terms to understand what could be problematic. And that's when we say the best authority you can always check with if you have a concern is your board attorney, who is the final arbiter of those kinds of decisions to help keep and guide the board safe so that you don't accidentally overstep, because there are individual circumstances in many cases that might, tweak something that seems on the surface like it would be okay, but it's not. So if you ever have any questions about it, your board attorney is really the person to ask. For years, we've been trying to discern relatives are included and what relatives aren't included. I'm going to send you this list tomorrow. They published it this past fall. BAs were dancing in the aisles with this because it lays out exactly whether it's a conflict or not a conflict for those kinds of problems that could exist. Okay? A school's official son-in-law as well as a daughter-in-law, a step-sibling, their spouse, their partner. So it's very clear now what those conflicts potentially could be. And I can't tell you how many phone calls we have all gotten. And they say, well, you know, it's my husband's second cousin's third wife's nephew. Okay. We don't know the absolute answer to that because we can't know all of the circumstances. So again, this is from an advisory opinion that was asked, and they finally heard us long enough to write a list. It's really exciting. You can tell I have a boring life. But I do think it's important, okay? If you already have a relative working within the district, that person can continue to work in the district, meaning they were employed in the district before you were elected. They can continue that employment. However, you should not vote on their reemployment, their raises, the terms and conditions of their employment. You should not vote. You should recuse yourself because it's a conflict, okay? You may not hire the relative of a board member or the chief school administrator. The nepotism policy precludes that. It's right out there for you. But these are the guidelines if you already have someone that is within the district, okay? So you just need to remember that that's something that you have to think about. Collective bargaining is also governed under this, and I'm not going to take time to read the entire chart to you. You'll be able to see it. It's pretty clear. What is the relationship to the board member? What is the current member's status in terms of a public teachers union? And this is for NJEA, the Teamsters, the AFL-CIO, or any similar statewide union that a group or an employee might belong to, because different districts have different teachers associations. Some are NJEA, some are, NJEA, part of NEA. Some are part of the AFL-CIO. We do have some Teamsters as well. And that tells you whether you can participate in negotiations and then whether you can vote to ratify the contract once you have negotiated that contract. Okay? So keep in mind, it used to be when I sat on the Board of Education that if you were endorsed during the course of the election time by the Teachers Association, you were automatically out of negotiations for the first year of your term as a board member. They have changed that. They have now said that it's not an automatic per se conflict unless a financial contribution is given and intended to influence the member. So just keep that in mind. But keep in mind also that the School Ethics Commission has said it's not just a violation of the law, it's also the perception of a violation. So if it's well known in the community that you're part of a teachers association, oftentimes there might be a perception if you were participating that could be problematic, okay? There are all kinds, and I'm not going to take the time to read through all of these. These are all advisory opinions related to those prohibited acts that you can read at your leisure. And again, all the citations are there. So if you want to read the totality of the case to see the gory details, that's available to you online as well. This actually has just come out in the last couple of months, and it's sort of a dramatic change. So what is the impact on committee assignments when the relative works in the district? So the board president has a child who's an instructional assistant in the district. She cannot choose committee members, be on any committee involving the local education association matters related to the superintendent, may not choose the chair members or members of a committee, or serve on any committee that remotely touches directly upon the family member's employment, including but not limited to personnel, negotiations, instruction, and finance, which essentially means you will be a board member without a committee. Okay? This is a huge change. We have a lot of Board of Education members who are either teachers, or who are part of the educational systems of various districts. And so, again, this can be problematic. And watch school board notes, because I fully expect to see some additional advisory opinions coming out limiting board officers' ability to serve on committees if they have conflicts of one kind or another. This is a sea change. Impact on executive session. Again, you should never be in executive session if there's any time that there's a member of your family being discussed in executive session. One example is a board member, they had a vacancy, just like you do, and someone's spouse applied, that sat on the board, spouse applied for the position, and the board member went into executive session, even though her spouse was sitting in interviewing with the Board of Education. Okay? That was a violation. Okay? A board president attended multiple discussions involving spouses, and other members were unaware of the identity. And in both cases, counsel was consulted first. They did it anyway. Okay? So they were both censured. Okay? So just keep in mind, you should, again, it was seen as trying to have an unwarranted privilege that wouldn't accrue to anyone else except to you, the spouse of the person who was applying, or the immediate family member that was applying for the position. And it wasn't a paid position, it was a Board of Education seat, okay? And that's a significant difference. It wasn't hiring them, it was simply appointing them. And so you just need to make sure, because they felt that the board member's presence could chill or intimidate the comments and opinions of others, okay? So you don't want to have that happen either. Volunteering in schools. There are also some constraints. This is a relatively recent phenomenon in the last 5 years around board members volunteering in the school. These did not exist when I was a Board of Education member. Clearly, it has to do with the degree of giving or taking directions to students or staff. Will you be in the building often? You should not be thought of as a fixture in the building. If people think you belong in the building, that's a problem, because you don't. You're a Board of Education member, not a staff member. Handling school funds of any sort. I tell this story, I probably told it to you all. Some of you will recognize this story, so forgive me. I used to run the school store, volunteer. Once a month, they would run the school store for the elementary kids, and literally, it's a long time ago, my kids are not young, they're married and have kids. It was nickels and dimes and quarters. It was a pittance for erasers and stickers and folders and book covers and that kind of thing. I routinely handled the money. Couldn't have been 15 bucks on a good day. It was nothing. However, that would be a problem now. So please do not, in a volunteer capacity in any way, handle any kinds of funds, no matter how minimal you think they may be, or even if they're handing you checks for wrapping paper or chocolates or whatever kind of fundraisers you may be doing. You don't want to be in that process, okay? You cannot be a coach, volunteer coach, or an advisor to any co-curricular program in the school district as long as you're on the Board of Education. You can be a coach for Park and Recs. You can do Pop Warner. You can be you can go to every activity that you want. However, you cannot be a regular advisor. Again, we had a board member who ran a stamp collecting club for first graders, and he was an older gentleman. Stamp collecting used to be big. I probably have 5 different sets of stamp albums in my basement from my father-in-law, my father, my brother, all of whom, are long gone. And he loved doing that, and the youngsters loved it. It was a way of teaching geography, teaching history, because stamps typically are for famous people and places and locations and events. And the district said, we're really sorry, after these advisories came out, you can't do it. So he resigned from the board. He said, because if I don't, no one's going to do this, because there is nobody to do this particular thing. And he loved doing it with the little kids. And so That to me was a really sad outcome. I know that's not what was intended by this, but sometimes when they make a broad blanket kind of thing like this, it also has some downsides to it as well. And so I understand that, but you need to make sure. Always advise the superintendent if you're going to be in a school building, and you can be in the school building, you know, as a parent for your child's teacher conference, you know, carting in a science project, or if you have a legitimate reason to be in the school building, but you should not routinely be in a school building unless you have a purpose in being there. You are not there to look and count the number of ceiling tiles that may be out of place, or a cracked tile, you know, or a leaky bathroom. That's not your role as a Board of Education member. There are people who take care of those things. And again, you know, just always be cognizant when you are in the building, and trust me when I tell you, it takes about 15 seconds for every teacher to know when you were in this building or any of the building, and everyone knows you're there. You can go to any public event you want. I would encourage you to go to as many things as you can. It's wonderful for the community to see you. It's wonderful for the kids to see you. They appreciate your taking your time to come to those things. Please go, but it's different than visiting the schools on a regular basis. You have no business in the schools unless you're doing a tour of the facilities with the business administrator to look at the changes that were made to the tech lab or something. That's a legitimate reason to be in there. It's a board function, but beyond that, you don't routinely belong in the schools at all. Okay. Voting. Again, board members are entrusted with listening to recommendations from the district, and you have to continue your understand and consider your requirements around this. For appointment, transfer, or removal of certificated or non-certificate staff, you can vote any way you want, as long, again, as it's not arbitrary and capricious. Okay? And that's just something that you have to, and these are some of the advisories that have been recently released. Here's one that is particularly, I think, important to all of you. The Ethics Commission was asked if you were to vote in the affirmative on a board motion to refuse to implement the New Jersey Student Learning Standards for comprehensive health and PE, would that be problematic? And the SEC's response is there, and it says, it was shown that a school official acted in a contrary way to the laws, rules, and regulations promulgated by the state board. You could be in violation of the law. By the way, they just added to the HPE standards grief education for students that is now going to be a part of the New Jersey Student Learning Standards. Helping students learn to handle and address grief will be part of the HPE standards that was just promulgated just this past week or so. We're the first state in 50 to have that as an educational standard. I'm blowing by my favorite thing. Social media, okay? This has taken up more time in the School Ethics Commission than any other topic that they have been dealing with, and that's the board member use of social media. You do not automatically give up to your right to free speech. However, that being said, it is a balance between your right to free speech and the restrictions placed on you by statute and law, as well as the Code of Ethics. Protecting school personnel and the proper performance of their duties, not taking personal action that could compromise the Board of Education. So it is a limited right. And one of my board members said to me, well, I had more rights when I wasn't a board member. I said, that's true, you did. But you ran for the board, and you're a publicly elected official, and you are constrained by the Code of Ethics and by state law and regulation. And interestingly enough, when the School Ethics Commission held around the HPE standards, they said individually if you voted no, that wasn't a problem. However, if the full board were to have voted on that and refused to implement, that would be a violation, okay? So individually it was okay, but collectively it would have been a problem, okay? Again, in large part, using social media depends on the content of your speech and what it is you are posting. Again, keep in mind that the Open Public Meetings Act says that the public has the right to observe your deliberations and to listen to you discuss and determine how the conduct of the district moves forward, the business of the district. If you are posting pieces on social media, not everyone reads social media. Just a word about closed social media groups, like closed Facebook pages that are not open to your entire community. It is very possible that if there's a majority of the board on that same group or in that same group, you could be violating the Open Public Meetings Act. And so we strongly discourage you from belonging to any closed Facebook group that is related to your community. You know, if it's how to quilt, I think that's just okay and not a problem. However, if it's around your community or the district in any kind of fashion, if you're all belonging to the same closed Facebook group, that could be problematic and subject you to potential issues with the School Ethics Commission by virtue of that. So if that's the case here, I know in my community there's several Facebook groups. I don't belong to any of them. I've managed to live a very long, healthy life without being on social media. And I'm not knocking it. It has a lot of virtues, I'm sure. I have trouble finding them because most of the time that I spend with board members who are upset, it's generally about things that are said on social media, okay? So just keep in mind, the School Ethics Commission has said, you know, that if it's a question that does not relate to board business or its operations, and it's reasonable to perceive the speech as being offered in your official capacity or pursuant to your district, your duties, it can be a violation, okay? So again, there's a case where a parent asked and said, I'm an educator. I would like to respond on Facebook to questions and answers from members of the public in the community in which he was a board member. Is that a problem? And they weighed in and said, absolutely, because you are not a school official. You're a Board of Education member, you're a public official, and so there's always that risk that the information you're providing could be misinterpreted as opposed to not. So my best advice to all of you is you want to drive people to your website where accurate, complete, and total information about everything that goes on in the district should reside, as opposed to individually posting it, because there's always subject to bias or misinterpretation or misunderstanding. So I encourage all of you to use social media with caution. I used to tell my board members, because really social media was not ubiquitous 20 years ago, and people would leave a meeting and would be upset, and they'd go home and they'd type an email to another board member. I'd say save it as a draft, go to bed, do whatever you need to do, get up the next morning and hit delete. Call up the board member and have a conversation. So going after each other on social media or implying that you're going after folks on social media is really not a good use of your time, and it doesn't really move the district forward. It generally ends up creating hard feelings, hurt feelings. It can be very, very divisive. And the SEC has asked us to talk about this with boards of education and help them to understand the risks that are involved when you begin discussing district business online, whether it's an X account, see, I got it, it's not Twitter anymore, an X account, Facebook. Well, there are more platforms that I don't have any idea who they are, but you just don't want to find yourself in that position. You should, if you're going to go ahead and do it, dip your toe into that water, you should make sure that you have included a disclaimer. It says, the following statements are made in my capacity as a private citizen, not in my capacity as a board member. These statements are also not representative of the board, its individual members, and solely represent my own personal views. Some kind of language like that. It doesn't have to be word for word that the SEC says this is the disclaimer. I, on the other hand, am one of those rule followers. I'd use the actual disclaimer from the School Ethics Commission just to make sure I've covered myself and been very clear. You need to include that, okay? So, again, if you use it, does that automatically protect you? It depends on the content of the speech. So you can use a disclaimer, but then if you go wandering off into those areas where you ought not to be discussing district business, something confidential, attacking a staff member, and so forth and so on, you will still be in violation even with the disclaimer. So you just need to know that, okay? Again, if it's reasonable, a member of the public could perceive you're speaking in your official capacity. Never use your district email address to post on social media. That email address should be solely used exclusively for district business. If you're going to post on social media, use your private account, okay? Because if you use your, if it says dharvey@watchungschools.org, that's a problem, okay? If it says harvey.dury@gmail, you have less of a problem, okay? Sorry, I'm not picking on you, I don't know, I'm just saying you need to be just very careful, okay? If you use, are you required to use the exact disclaimer? No, but you should use something very similar. Again, if you don't use the disclaimer, does that mean I'm automatically involved in violation? No, but you should. Again, it's a protection for you if you use it, okay? You should absolutely not use your campaign page, okay? Because it's going, once you've been elected, you should shut that down, put it on hiatus until you run for election the next time after having had a wonderful 3 years. But in those 3 years, you should not use your campaign site because they've clearly said it leads to confusion in the community because they're going to automatically attribute it to you, okay? Can you like or share a post? Yes, you can, but keep in mind, depending upon whose post you're liking or sharing, it could be misinterpreted as well, okay? Depending upon how potentially inflammatory a comment could be or how it could be perceived in the public could be. In a way, we've seen this particularly, I think the easiest example is the war in Gaza, with people posting various things. There have been several board members that have had to resign as a result of the kinds of postings that were made because they were so inflammatory, and it becomes a real difficult issue for a board to address and invites controversy that no Board of Education wants to have. And I'm not saying you can't have a position, but again, you have to be thoughtful about what it is you do. You're a publicly elected official. And you are that publicly elected official now until December 31st, 2020, whatever year you expire, okay? And you just need to be aware of that, no matter when your term expires, but it'll be on December 31st. After that, I don't care what you put on social media. You can put whatever you want. Well, you could get in trouble with your kids, trust me, for putting silly things. The use of divisive language. There's a very strong written, and I love it, it's not in this particular presentation, that talks about the fact that divisive language takes us off of the mission that we are there to do and could do the most damage to the children we are ultimately charged with serving. And so you really don't want to use language on social media that is inappropriate. Keep in mind, not only are adults reading those things, our children are reading those things. Our children are watching what we do, okay? So that's an important. In the end, we have recommend that you talk to your board attorney if you have a number of conflicted board members. I have some boards where there are 5 and 6 members conflicted because they have family members employed in school districts. I don't think you have anyone that is conflicted currently. However, you can check with your board attorney. Continue to check school board notes and school leader to keep abreast of the most recent advisories, because again, there's that expectation that you will be aware of what the advisories have said. And I fully expect more advisories that are going to limit officers from appointing committees and serving on committees by virtue of being endorsed by the Teachers Association and or having family members in a district. So stay tuned, because those things continue to change and evolve. They're different this year than they were last, okay? So I've included, and I'll send it to you, all of these links so that you have them, so that you, if you want, you can look at all of the most recent decisions. It's interesting to us. It may not be terribly interesting to all of you, but it is important that you be aware. Okay? Questions? I know that's a lot. I do understand that. But it's important.
Oh, I have one question about
Yes.
filing the disclosure statement.
Mhm.
Do you have to do that your second year you're here also?
Every year.
Every year you do?
Every single year you will be sent a financial disclosure form. Here's my trick to that. Copy this year's financial disclosure form because you have to have the name and the address of those places that you may receive income from. So for example, if I say this because I can say it, I'm old enough to say it. If you're getting Social Security, a Social Security check, you have to put the address. Who remembers where the Social Security check comes from? It goes to direct deposit. You got to look it up. It's a pain in the neck. So just make a copy of your financial disclosure statement. Save it till next year. I do it every year. Save it to the following year, and then you have all the information that you need to fill out each sequential year, unless you change jobs or win the lottery. Then you put the New Jersey lottery address. You retire. Okay. So yes, you do have to do it every year annually. And keep in mind, that's public information, and anyone's financial disclosure form can be accessed and seen. And there have been board members who, will say something's missing from someone else's financial disclosure forms that can create issues. So make sure that it's complete and thorough, okay? I think I'm kidding. Not. Questions? So I thought it would be helpful to go through some scenarios. I'm just going to grab my sheets.
This is a regular meeting, but it's not like you could stand up.
She lied when she called this a retreat.
No ice box.
We're going to talk about how you would manage this and what you do if this is a problem.
I thought you were going to hand out chocolate bars. I got excited.
Hear that what?
Chocolate bars.
They did it actually, believe it or not, they signed it when they read it at the board meeting. Isn't that nice? And I got them from everybody. Good job, everybody.
We're going to talk about how you would handle it and what you think is the appropriate thing to do in this particular instance.
Do we read them to ourselves, or do you want us to take turns reading a paragraph?
You can take turns. We'll start. Let's start with you. You're the board president.
A board member is a CPA for a well-respected accounting firm. Believing that the district needs to be fiscally conservative, the member takes the proposed budget and identifies several line items that could yield savings for the district. The member compiles the data into a report and distributes it at the following board meeting for consideration. We'll go left, this way?
You will, but
Okay.
I want to know what you're going to do to address that. Is that okay? You can't all sit and look at me and be quiet. It's not okay. Manny, why isn't it okay? Mo, I'm sorry. You were the one shaking your head.
They're trying to run the schools instead of just ensuring they're well run.
Exactly. And additionally, what didn't it go to first?
The committee.
The committee. So if you were a board member and you had this concern, and you thought that there was a savings that could accrue to the district through doing something particular, if you took that to the finance committee and said, here's something I think you all should look at, and it ran through the committee and the administration and the business administrator all had input on that, then it could eventually either find its way into the budget, or it could be discussed at a full board meeting if that's what the committee recommended. But it should never just be handed out to the board as a fait accompli, as opposed to going through the process. You operate by committee, and therefore, if you have an issue or an item that you think the committee should be looking at, you can ask that it be added to that agenda for that committee, and then it can be addressed in committee, and if recommended, it would then come forward to the board. So, two reasons why it's not a good idea. Okay? You want to do the second one? I'm sorry.
During executive session, the board has provided information on an alleged victim involving a teacher and a student who happens to live next door to one of the other board members. The next day, the board member sees the parents of the student in their yard and has a conversation with them to get their side of the story.
Good idea? Bad idea? Awful idea? Wonderful idea. You're like being nice to the parents. I care about the people I live next to. What do you think?
I'd have to recuse.
You'd have to recuse yourself. Additionally, you can't investigate. Right? And again, you're going to give them the idea that somehow you can do something about their problem, and at the end of the day, you can't. You're not there to solve individual family members, student members' issues. That's not the role of the board. The next one.
During intermission of the middle school play, a board member is approached by a few parents who inform her the water fountain in the hall is leaking water on the floor. The member tracks down a janitor and directs him to clean up the water and fix the fountain as it poses a safety hazard.
Appropriate. Seems like a good idea, right? If it's a safety hazard, it could slip.
She should tell the principal who's there and let her do it, or he do it.
Yes, or tell the janitor that there's a leak and let him, but particularly you would be better served by telling the principal and letting him. You cannot direct any staff member. You have no authority to direct any staff member. The Board of Education has one employee, one, the superintendent. You hold the superintendent accountable for their performance through their annual evaluation. The superintendent holds all other staff accountable, either through directly or through delegation, for example, to the principals of the buildings who hold their teachers accountable, but they are then accountable to the soup, and ultimately, again, you hold the superintendent accountable, but you only have that one employee. That's it.
So if that principal's not there, do you tell the teacher?
Tell a teacher, tell another staff member. There's a leak. We don't want anybody to get hurt or to slip. We need to do something, but they will figure out how to fix it. Okay? You're not going to stand there and say, give me a wrench, I'll fix it for you. First of all, I wouldn't know how to do that. Most of us wouldn't, but again, and you can't direct staff either. And that's the important piece here. No board member should ever be providing direction to a staff member. Okay? If you have a concern or you see something that is a concern, the appropriate response is to immediately let your superintendent know so that that can be addressed. Okay? Unless it's an emergent situation, in which case dial 911 like any other situation. Do you know, if you saw a child down and hurt, you could dial 911, call the superintendent. If the child's out there by himself or something like that. But again, you don't have the authority to do beyond that. Yes, next one.
A newly elected member who won with support from the teachers' union is invited to lunch by the union president. The president indicates the teachers will be negotiating a new contract and would like to help the member better understand the union's position. The member agrees to go.
Good idea? Bad idea?
Don't go.
Don't go. First of all, there's a negotiations committee, I'm sure. But secondarily, that's a setup. And you will be like a lamb to the slaughter, okay? You never, and no, we say this about negotiations all the time. sometimes I'll have board presidents say, look, I know the Teachers Association president, he and I can just have a conversation, or she and I, and we can settle this contract in 15 minutes. So I'm just going to have breakfast with him at the local diner, and we'll be done. Yeah, you'll be done. You'll be toast, okay? Never go into any kind of meeting with the association without either your entire committee, but at least one other board member, okay? And while this seems like it's a really gracious offer to help educate, believe me, it can be a very uncomfortable situation for you as a board member, and not one you want to find yourself in, because they have lots of experience negotiating. And keep in mind, all of you are lay people. You sit on your board as a lay person. I'm a former teacher. I was president of the Teachers Association. I've negotiated on that side of the table. And when I was a board member, I've negotiated on the other side of the table. But I will tell you, when I was a association president, and it was Pennsylvania Education Association, not NJ, we went to classes on how to negotiate. And they have professionals that assist teachers, officers, teacher union officers in knowing how to do that. So just keep in mind, you always have to be just a little wary of that situation. Okay? All right. Next one.
During photography class, a student is accidentally hit by a drone that was being used as part of the lesson. Due to the uproar and safety concerns, the board swiftly adopts a new policy prohibiting the use of drones on school property or for any district-related activity for any reason.
What do you think? You're a policy-making body.
Why not?
As long as it goes through the committee.
Never change your policy in the midst of a crisis, right? Because now you've prohibited the use of all drones. Maybe you need to have aerial photographs done by drones for the construction project that expands your school. You've now prohibited that. Again, it needs to go through committee. Policy needs to be thoughtfully developed. There's nothing wrong with having a policy around drones if you don't want them. That's fine. But in the middle of an upheaval or a crisis, you don't immediately change your policy, okay? And again, the likelihood of a child being hit by a drone is very slim. I wrote that with a little caution because I thought, I wouldn't want my kids hit by a drone. It depends on the size, and hopefully they're not armed. They're just taking pictures. So that is just the message there, is you are a policy-making body, but you need to be thoughtful and careful about the policies you adopt, and it's never time to do it when there is a crisis. You have to wait for the crisis to pass, and then you can begin looking at it in a very thoughtful, thorough way to make sure your policy is well done. The next one. Yes.
A veteran teacher is upset she's being moved to a different grade level and speaks to the superintendent. Despite arguing a teacher with less seniority be transferred, the superintendent upholds the decision. Believing the superintendent is treating her unfairly, the teacher reaches out to a few board members who agree to intervene. I don't think anyone but the superintendent deals with staff and such.
Absolutely. And additionally, you're undermining the authority of your administration. You don't have the authority. You can only hire someone with the affirmative recommendation of the superintendent. Board's role in personnel is the most limited of all of the areas in which you are authorized to work. So, for example, you can't hire someone because you think they're the best person, or agree you're not going to appoint the person the superintendent recommends because you know someone better for that job. Again, you don't want to, and the second corollary to that is you need to notify the superintendent immediately of who has reached out to you, because the staff knows that they have a process by which their voice can be heard. If they have difficulty with the decision that the superintendent has made, They can file a grievance. There's an entire process put in place for their voices to be heard. And it's not going directly to Board of Education members. Sometimes that happens, especially in smaller communities where there are teachers who live in the district where they teach. And so they know you as a friend. It doesn't mean you can't have teachers who work in this district that are your friends, but you should never be discussing district business, nor should they be asking you for any kind of special treatment or asking you to solve a problem, because again, they have a very specific process. Every building has a building rep that they can go to if they have an issue or a concern that they want addressed. And there's a procedure in place that's embodied in the negotiated agreement, in the contract, that spells out what that process looks like. And believe me, teachers have copies of those contracts and they know what their rights are. Okay? But the superintendent needs to have managerial discretion to make the best decisions for the students within the entire district. And sometimes that can be upsetting to teachers, and I understand that as a former teacher. No one likes to be moved around necessarily, especially if they've been in a building for a very long time, but sometimes there are changes that have to be made. So, you know, it is important for the board to understand, and again, you know, if that were to happen, if a staff member reaches out to you, even if they are a friend, you need to say, I can't talk to you about this. I have nothing to do with this. You need to find a solution somewhere else. And they do know that. Believe me, they know that they have a process and a way to find a solution. Maybe not one they like, but one that they can at least seek. And so you need to remember that. Okay? Last one.
A member is unhappy with the leadership of the long-serving board president and decides to run against him at the upcoming reorg meeting. Wanting to avoid an uncomfortable and contentious situation in public, the member decides to send individual emails to the other members criticizing the leadership of the current president and asking for their support in his bid for position.
What do you think? Open Public Meetings Act says the public has the right to witness your discussions and to observe the district of the business of the district. That includes election of officers. So sending emails and lobbying folks for a particular position, like an officer position, or a particular issue that you want other board members to vote with you on, that you believe strongly about, and advocating for that is not appropriate. The rest of the board needs to hear all of those discussions, because the notion of a Board of Education is that in among the 9 or 8 or 7 of you, however many there are tonight, still on the board, there is collective wisdom in all of those voices, the different backgrounds, the different perspectives, the different viewpoints that you may all hold, and that's okay. You're not all going to agree with each other all the time. That's okay. You don't all have to agree. However, the public has a right to observe that, and in order to make the best decisions, you have to have access to all of that information and all of those discussions. Additionally, if it creates a round-robin process where one board member emails another board member on a particular topic, I want you to vote yes on banning drones in the district, and then you email you, and then you email Manny, who then emails Mo, and then emails Dory. You've now got a quorum of the board, and you're conducting business outside of the public light. Okay? So you should not be doing this or any other district business online. That's why many emails you may see say, do not reply all. The reason for that is that it's violative of the Open Public Meetings Law. Okay? And you don't want to be in violation of that. All district business should be discussed and disposed of at the board table at a duly advertised meeting of the board. And that's an important piece. Okay. Questions? None of these raise any questions with any of you. That's wonderful. I expect 100%. Okay. The other topic, and I don't know, Julie, if you want to weigh in on this, was we were going to discuss district goals and board goals for the remainder of the year. I would remind the board, and I have packets for you with information, and one of those pieces is the annual calendar for Board of Education members that divides by month the kind of activities you are doing. So typically you would do goal setting in late summer or late spring, early summer, so that the administration has the full year to work toward achieving the district goals. District goals refer to the overall operation of your district in every aspect: finance, facilities, academic achievement, personnel. I'm sure I'm leaving out a million things that I'm not coming to mind. However, those are district goals. What it is you want to see happen in the district that will move your district forward over the course of the year to hit that goal. They become the objective the objectives that you will be measuring the superintendent's performance on at the end of a year. However, we are now in the first month of the second part of this school year, okay? So tonight when we talk about district goals, I think what you need to focus on around those district goals are what are our priorities between now and June, and being mindful of that compacted timeline as opposed to doing it in the May-June timeframe, which then gives the entire summer as well as the school year to make progress on those district goals. And it becomes a matter of identifying what are those things that are most pressing that need addressed between now and June that you need to make progress around. So that is what we are going to talk about now. What are those things that are most pressing? And when we do goal setting, and I think I've done it with this board in Watchung, not recently, but in previous years, we ask the superintendent to weigh in on what are those things that are most pressing that have to be accomplished, so that you can hear from your educational experts what are those things that are most important, because there are a myriad of things we would all like to see happen in a district. But given that we are already in January, in fact, we're almost to February when I look at my calendar, for heaven's sakes, and so it's a very compacted timeline. So I would ask Julie to share with the board what you believe are the things that need addressed first.
Sorry, I moved my mic out of it. So honestly, you all know exactly what I think the things we have to do right away are. Some of them we don't even have a choice about. Not that that doesn't mean we don't discuss it. That's what we're here to do. But the truth is, with Karen sitting next to me, having not even really started full-time yet, we have to come to a stable budget, right? A balanced, stable budget. And I remind you, I know we got the committee dates and the board meeting dates. We do have to approve a tentative budget and upload it to the state for that Monday, March 18th meeting. So that's only 2 months. 3 board meetings, 2 months. So that budget for me, however you want to label it, call it, as a district goal, and I'll speak for Karen, we don't have a choice, has to be done, and it's going to take a huge amount of time and work to be able to do that. You know that situation. The other thing we've already committed to, all of us, me on the hook for it, but all of us have committed to, is transportation. We knew the beginning, I was very open about it, Patty was open about it, we could not fix our current problem. We could get it consistent. We could lobby the bus company for consistent drivers and consistent times, but I couldn't fix it in our current configuration. And I committed, and I am still committed to this. We've already started, I think somebody's committee reported it, maybe curriculum? Somebody reported it at the last board meeting. We've already started conversations with the high school on that shared service. I'm part of a study group of superintendents in other districts of what they're doing and what they have done, because everybody's having the same problem, unfortunately. So for me, that transportation piece, having more town halls, more conversations, being able to come up with 3 or 4 options for fixing it, really fixing it, right? Whatever that means. Bell times, or I don't even know all the different things, has to be a priority. We will be, during the budget process, working with the high school if we're continuing, I think we are out of choices too, but continuing the shared service, looking at the costs. So some of that information we'll know. Some of it we have to do. We said we wanted to bring in the mobile fingerprinting unit for volunteers for the fall. We might have to open up the contract to look at those bell times. So short period of time to accomplish something, again, that I think we've already committed to. But open to discussion. This is your discussion. The third one, surprising to me, but in the forefront of my mind, and we talked about this actually when I interviewed, was the strategic plan. I think, and I understand why the strategic planning process wasn't implemented last year, but the strategic plan that you have in place, the 5-year strategic plan, ends in June. Now, a strategic planning process is usually something we would do over a whole year, right? We have town halls, we talk to everybody, we identify themes and focus areas and action goals for each year. I want to do that. Again, hugely time consuming. That is not a small effort. And strategic planning, Gwen listed, 4, 5, 6 different areas for goals. Strategic planning, depending on the themes that emerge or the goals that emerge or the action items that emerge, could encompass all of those things. None of those topics, personnel, academics, all of that, are going to be accomplished in 6 months. So just my 2 cents on 3 goals. I wouldn't advocate for more than that because I doubt we could accomplish that, but just my 2 cents.
Did the survey, remember, with the parents for the transportation?
Yeah, so the survey was just to keep it consistent as we can right now, but to fix it, right? I think we all agreed there was not much I could do this year, but there's a lot of things we could look at to try and fix it for the future. Actually fix it, not just be lucky that we're consistent.
So for the strategic plan, is your hope that we could develop a 5-year strategic plan in the next 6 months?
It would be my hope. I mean, that's an area of expertise for me. I know Gwen does this in districts, all different districts. I heard in a meeting, and I have to get clarification on that there was conversation last year about a strategic plan, even though the process didn't go forward. I believe, and Gwen, like I said, you do this in a lot of districts, that if we survey, if we bring people together to have the conversations, if we, at the very least, find the themes and the focus areas, even if we don't have everything done by June 30th, but we're ready to go, for the fall, I do think that we could. It's going to be a lot, but I also think if we're doing town halls on transportation, we know that that's going to be, I hate to say it, that's going to be one of the focus, I know it's one of the focus areas before we even bring everybody together. So some of these things, maybe we have a dual purpose.
Does the strategic plan, is this the appropriate time for me to be asking?
All discussion. This is your retreat.
Does the strategic plan help us determine budget, or do we need to figure out budget issues first to then develop the strategic plan?
I think there's 2 different things. We haven't really started talking about board goals. maybe Gwen will elucidate you with the board goals. Our budget issues cannot wait 5 years. You heard Ernie in October talking about, you know, how we got to where we are, all of the changes in revenues and appropriations that we made, right? Covered the shortfall. We are not at a deficit. But as again, poor Karen, I'm afraid to say it out loud before she's even started. But we have to have the 24-25 budget complete and voted on by this board, 9 members of this board, by March. That gives us a little time, right? It's not final until your May vote, but that has to get done in the next, again, couple months and 3 board meetings. Your strategic plan will be a lot longer than that. Does that mean as part of the strategic plan, you might not, again, as a community, come up with a goal to stabilize finances or to look at how to not ever have this kind of financial instability again? Yeah, that's a perfect kind of goal, right? They're different things.
You know, in a strategic plan, typically there's something around finance and facilities or operations that can include things like transportation, finances, the budget, but the budget, because there are state mandated dates that you all have to hit, every board.
Every
in the
board.
State of New Jersey, it's not just you, have to hit when it gets submitted, the preliminary budget to the executive county superintendent, wait for their approval, it comes back. I mean, there's a whole budget calendar that's laid out with state mandated dates, that you have to hit. Strategic planning, you know, typically you end up with 4 focus areas. There's generally one around teaching and learning, academic achievement, curriculum and instruction, whatever you want to, you know, the big academic piece. That can also include under that umbrella things like professional development, co-curricular programming, because for a lot of kids, not so much at the K-8 level, but at the high school level, you know, those co-curriculars are sometimes what keeps kids in school and learning, and it can be as important as pieces to the curriculum. Then you all, you know, what we're seeing typically is then you see something in the area of operations, transportation, business, finance, food service, transportation, all of those pieces. Another goal area that often gets talked about is community engagement. How do we engage and outreach to our communities? That's the goal area we see in a lot of districts.
Erin needs you on your microphone.
Sorry, I forget that I have to be on mic. That's an area that a lot of districts look at. You know, it depends on the other concerns within your district and your community, what that other goal area turns out to be. Depending on what year is, sometimes it's safety and security. Sometimes that falls under the operations piece, not a separate goal area. But again, it just depends on your community and what's important to them at a particular period in time. You know, for several years it was technology, and then COVID hit, and one of the unintended consequences to COVID that in some ways was fortunate for districts is it forced a lot of districts to go one-to-one that weren't, and to upgrade their technology and their infrastructure so that they had better high-speed internet and so forth. So we're seeing fewer and fewer districts focus on technology as a separate area, because it often gets integrated into the teaching and learning curriculum piece, because it can be used for that, obviously. Although, you know, in some districts, technology is still an issue in terms of cyber technology, and you know, making sure your district can't be hacked or attacked and hijacked. And so cybersecurity is an area for some communities. Those are typically the kinds of areas that you see coming out of strategic plans. They tend to be big picture items because it's a 5-year plan, so they're going to be different objectives for each year within those goal areas and the goal statement as you move forward.
Julie, do you work on these in the committees?
What?
All these goals and such? I mean, do we discuss this kind of thing?
Yeah, well, so, of course. So, you know, even just being in committees now, and I'll say this more for new people, I'm thinking you're asking me this rhetorically. So, you know that when we're talking about the budget, we did that in all 4 committees, right? We're talking about transportation, we report that in all 4 committees and have those conversations. when we do the calendar, right? It's not just because it's the academic calendar. We don't just do that in operations or curriculum. We do that in all 4 committees because we need everybody to have that engagement. So for these goals, these district goals, yes, because we haven't gotten to this part of the agenda yet, but that's what I'm responsible for making sure happens, right? That's the part where you're gonna evaluate, did we do this, right? So has to be those conversations in committee.
So would an appropriate board goal then be to develop a working 5-year strategic plan for 2024 to 2028 by June?
I wrote it a little differently.
Are you doing board or district? So
I'm just going to say, that's not a
two
board goal.
different
That's a district
things.
It's a district goal. The board can have as a board goal to support the development of the strategic plan. But it was not your goal, it's Julie's goal to make it happen, okay? Board goals refer to the way you operate and you function, your processes and procedures as a board. District goals refer to what the board wants to see happen in the district that will move the district forward in the course of a school year. The one beauty of having a strategic plan, once it's finished, and it's a 5-year plan, you can pull your annual district goals right from the strategic plan. Those are your marching orders from the board and the community. And the beauty of it is it also functions to really help with community engagement, because you're going to survey the community, you're going to invite them in, you're going to hear what they have to say, listen to what their priorities are, and come to a conclusion around, okay, what are the things we need to focus on? You know, in some districts, recently it has been around offering full-day kindergarten in those couple of districts in the county, and there aren't many that don't have full-day kindergarten. I say this with great pride. We started working on full-day kindergarten Bridgewater Raritan in 2000, and it was in the 1990s. It wasn't even in the 2000s. They finally got it done this year. I called the superintendent and said, way to go, because it took that long. And the community was asking in the 1990s for full-day kindergarten, but we never had the money to be able to do it or the space. And, you know, so there are things that happen. So, you know, these are the kinds of having those discussions around your vision. What is your vision for the future? What does Watchung education look like in 5 years? Right? When you get to 2029, 2030, I know it sounds outrageous, doesn't
I
it?
think I got a chill, 2030.
No. How will education look different in Watchung than it does right now? You know, I don't have the answer for that. But that's something that you want to hear from your community, is what are their aspirations for their children? What do they want to see happen? What's important? What matters? What's valuable? So I wrote it this way, and I have it turned this way because of the camera. I didn't have the mic. I did remember I was on camera, so I wrote it over here. But I'm going to turn it this way now so you can see it. To develop and approve a sustainable, balanced budget. Because not only does it need to be balanced, but it needs to be sustainable over time. Right? So that you are not spending money that you don't have. Not that you ever would dream of doing that, but sustainable, because a lot of districts, for example, and this is true for all districts in the state, ESSA money is going away. And a lot of districts used ESSA money for budget items in preceding years that no longer is available to them because those funds are gone, okay? And so that's why thinking about your budget in sustainable terms is as important as making sure it's balanced. Finding solutions to solve transportation concerns. That is what you've got to do. You have to do that. And then begin development of a strategic plan. I didn't put completed because you might not get it all done.
Thanks. We'll do our best.
So those are the district goals. So then are our board goals meant to support the district goals?
Generally speaking, your board goals should always support district goals. And if we did this in a normal timeline, typically in the May-June, actually the May-June-July timeframe, you would evaluate your superintendent, which all has to be done by July 1. You would complete a board self-assessment. And that self-assessment of the board and how you operate and function would be used to help set board goals. And that's typically the order. I have the calendar in your folder that lays it out month by month, so you can see what that looks like. But your board goals should always support the district goals. What is it that we can do as a board to better support the administration in achieving the district goals? Because that's what you're here for, right? The big picture district goals. Are these okay for district goals between now and June? We have,
I like them.
everybody's good with that?
We need a new board member, too.
Hmm?
We need a new board member.
That's true, they do need to have a
Put that one
full
first.
board. But that's your job,
That's
a
your
board
goal. That's your responsibility, right?
Because you guys are the one, you know, right, you're gonna advertise, you're gonna get those letters of interest and resumes, you're gonna interview all the candidates, you're gonna vote, right? So that's actually a good board goal.
Two, right?
No, Anthony's just absent, Rich,
Oh, okay.
Rich resigned.
Okay. I was.
I know, you counted, that's all. But no, Anthony's on a business
Oh,
trip.
okay.
We sing for you, so you're squeaky.
Okay, so I wrote the first one, to find and appoint a new board member and provide support and onboarding, because you're going to invite someone to join a team that already exists. So you have that obligation to provide them with support and onboarding. And if you need those materials, I know Julie has them, I have them, but that's the board's responsibility, and that's a board goal. It's a perfect board goal, because you want to have a complete team. Other thoughts around board goals?
Sure, I got one. We've had this in the past, but I think it might help us to foster a more positive and supportive working environment during Board of Education meetings and committee meetings. Create an environment of civility and professionalism with more straightforward communication among board members and the superintendent during all meetings.
Want to just email that to me?
Yes,
I can't
will.
write that fast, do I?
it's okay.
Foster a more positive climate and culture?
Yes.
For the board?
Yeah.
At all meetings? Where's civility
Yeah.
there, dear? Where did I miss those words? Hmm? At all meetings, including committee meetings, right?
Yes. And with the superintendent.
All right, if you send me that language, I can write it up, because I will send you a goals memo on this with, that you can't, because my scribble's pretty bad, I get that. Does that work as a board goal? I think that's really important. And again, we are seeing more and more boards struggle with civility. And keep in mind, not only is your community watching, but your kids are watching. Your kids are watching. So it's important. It really is important, because at the end of the day, the community's going to paint you all with the same brush, right? Whether you've participated or whether you've not been civil or are always civil, you know, it's like they can't play nicely in the sandbox. And they have an expectation and a right to have that expectation that you will go along to get along. Doesn't mean you always have to agree. It's okay to disagree, but disagree on the issue. Don't disagree on each other, okay? Don't make it personal. Make it about the issue. Because we're going to have different perspectives. I feel differently about things. Those of you who are married to the same person for a very long time know you can have wildly divergent perspectives on almost any issue, okay? But that doesn't mean you throw out the baby with the bathwater, right? You have to all work together. You don't have to be best friends. I don't even mind if you don't like each other, but you have to work together. And you have to work together focused around what's good for all kids. That's what matters. That's why you're here on a Thursday night at almost 9 o'clock. It's important. Any other board goal that you think you should focus on? I'd like to add provide support for your superintendent in developing the strategic plan, whatever that means, right? Because there's some cost, obviously, that the board's going to have to, pick up, but also just making sure you get people out to come and to be heard and to participate in that plan, and that's invaluable. Because you all have different constituencies in your communities, whether it's, even if you're at different gyms, and we know you're not, because one's got cold water, one's got hot water, but you all have different groups of people that you know that you can bring with you to participate in that process. And that's important because you want to hear from every single constituency in the community, from preschool parents to retired folks to people who send their kids to private school, the naysayers, your municipal officials, the police chief, the fire chief. I did a strategic plan with a colleague in a school district on the edge of Morris County, right on the edge of Somerset County. And it was just, it's a beautiful K-8 building, and the cafeteria has one side of the walls that are all glass. And I mean, it's just, it was a beautiful, and it looks out on the woods. And we were just sitting, chatting. I was chatting with a gentleman before the meeting started, and I said, oh, this is such a great place for kids. They have lunch there. It's their all-purpose room. And he looked at me and he said, ma'am, this is my worst nightmare. I was like, excuse me? And he said, yeah, I'm the police chief. See those parking spaces? There are no ballards between the parking space and the glass. I never even saw it because I don't have that, I didn't have that perspective. And that's the beauty of strategic planning. I just looked at it and thought it looked so nice for kids. I didn't think about the fact that if I parked there and I hit the gas instead of the brake, I was going to meet half of the classes for lunch, and not in a good way. So, tell you, we went back, and we took, when we do a strategic plan, we tend to go back in once a year, and we ask for an update, and we talk about what we accomplished, and so forth and so on, and they had ballards, okay? So, sometimes we can live within a district and do things within a district. We just don't see it in the same, we don't have the same lens. And he was the police chief, he was there, and he said, they have got to do something. It got written into the strategic plan, and it happened. So, that's the value of inviting the community in and asking them, because they will see things that perhaps you don't see, or I don't see, or we see differently. And it just always stuck with me because I really felt a little stupid, but I just didn't think in those terms because my kids were all older, and I just thought, oh, this looks so nice and bucolic and pastoral, and he was having nightmares about it. So no one ever got hurt.
But I'll just say, along with that support from all of you, it takes a lot. Phyllis was there last night. Christine already left, but she was there last night for the parent meeting. For strategic plan meetings, transportation meetings, to have you part of the discussion in person, like to be able to come out to those, I know it's a lot, right, on top of everything else you do, but to have you part of that is really important. And after it gets developed, right, say you have 4 goals, as Gwen said, or 4 focus areas, to have administration, board members, community members stay on those committees over the whole 5 years is also really important. It might change, right? The people might. But having all of those voices, again, board, administration, community, I'm a big fan of students, believe it or not, even our K-8s on those committees, teachers, I want everybody. That's the kind of support. Yes, financial and time and all of that, but that kind of ongoing support is really important.
You really do want it, and kids have a wonderful, having kids participate in a strategic plan is an invaluable exercise because they're the ultimate consumer of what it is you do. So their perspective is not one you can ever possibly have, even if it's your own child, right? They're going to see things differently than you see them. So having them weigh in and participate is incredibly important. Don't forget the ministerium and the rabbinical council within a community, faith-based communities. That's an important piece. The fire department. I mean, all of those people who have, a role in the community, a stake in the community, it's important to hear from them and to get them to come out, and also for you to be present so that you can listen and hear. And sometimes boards end up hearing things that they may not have been a priority for you all, right? That it just hadn't risen to that level yet that you may hear, and that's helpful to you as well as a board to hear those things. What are the priorities in our community? What matters to them? What is their vision for the future of the district? Because it's important. It's very important.
Well, so if you can come to consensus on the goals, the board and district goals, you'll vote them. There'll be a resolution and vote to approve them at the January board meeting. I'm not going to wait, right? We have committees next week. We can already start planning for what we want to do, right? Unfortunately, I hate to say this, budget for sure, district goals, we've already had to start. Poor Karen doesn't even work here yet, and she's so far deep in you don't even know what position control roster to figure out staffing and health benefits, right? Because that's more than 80% of the budget. So if we don't know that, we can't even go forward. She's already, before she's even full-time, she's already doing that. So we've started in that way, but we're not waiting, right?
So I had a question. If with our goals that we set at the end of January, since we normally set them towards the end of the summer, let's say, would we then be doing another board retreat,
Yes.
but this time on schedule?
June.
And then we're setting new board goals and district goals. But for everybody to know, if we don't finish, which is what you guys are saying, especially like the strategic planning, then we can just continue with that goal.
These are short-term goals. Now, you will set new goals come hopefully June for the following school year. And if some of these are not complete, you carry them over with you, all right? And also, here's the thing. You still have to evaluate the superintendent. And the superintendent's evaluation by statute talks about progress toward district goals. So having 3, I don't even want to call them manageable because they're huge things, but at least then you know what you're going to evaluate your superintendent against, right? Is the budget being completed and submitted and being balanced and sustainable? The preliminary plans, or maybe even further than that, around developing a strategic plan are well in place. The buses, and what we're going to do in September in that regard has been addressed, so that when September rolls around, that the buses are going to roll, the kids are going to be there, and some of those issues that currently exist will have been resolved. If we can get the price of gas to go down and the cost of buses and get them to deliver buses on time, meaning the manufacturer, people can't even get buses that they've ordered. Some districts are waiting 2 and 3 years to get new buses that they've ordered if they own their own fleet. It's really been a nightmare for every school district in different ways, but the transportation. And it's a function of inflation, it was a function of COVID. I mean, it's just a whole host of things that have caused that to occur. But that's what that would look like. So I think you also need to think about, in terms of doing that evaluation, perhaps because these are such a short term and a short timeline for these goals, that the evaluation, you have to agree upon a tool to use to evaluate the superintendent. So in this instance, my recommendation would be to the board, and I know you've used our tool year after year after year, but for this year, I would think that you could do a summative evaluation that is a narrative based on progress toward these 3 goals that hits all of the strategic superintendent of, I have strategic planning now on the brain. The superintendent's evaluation requirements is around progress toward achievement of district goals and limited to that, and just do a narrative rather than trying to fill out all those forms and do all of that work just because of the compacted time frame. I don't know how you feel about that, but
I'm perfectly comfortable with that. I've used SBA's tool. We've had millions of tools, but most of them do start with July 1st and gathering evidence, and obviously ours won't. And I will just, to your point, at the reorg meeting, you voted a tentative board retreat date of June 20th to revisit goals, to set that evaluation tool for next year. So before that, right, we would do that board self-assessment that Gwen talked about. And we would do the actual evaluation, because it's due by July 1st.
by July 1st.
So we could do that then too. So you already actually have that date carved out.
And it'll be much easier to do when you have a whole year to work on goals, because
And I also think having those the big conversations, right? And this is the place for you to have those conversations. I know somebody asked, is this the right time? You know, even if it's not something we set as a goal now, but to have those discussions is important. It'll come out in those strategic plan conversations with the whole community, right? There's no way that, even in the entry plans, I've been able to do those conversations. There are very clear themes, right? And those themes are what's going to lead you to whatever focus areas and goals. You might even decide that you want to start with looking at the mission and vision of the district. I don't know when that was done. I'm certainly not opening that can of worms if you don't want to. But that's even one other thing, right? Does the mission reflect what you're hoping to accomplish? That's just
and I think
another
you can
thought.
leave your mission alone, probably. I mean, I've read your mission.
Yeah, I just, as a
No,
comment.
but here's what I would say. I think you need to do some visioning with the community,
There you go.
because I think your mission is still
Kids?
on point and valid and reflects the will of your your community. But I think doing the visioning, starting with that visioning piece, rather than trying to tackle the mission and the vision, I think.
I just meant it's everything's on the table is
I
kind
know,
of what.
and you could do whatever you'd like.
So, and including what you believe, right? In my last district, we had, this is what we believe, this
What is the role of parents? What is
Yep.
the role of the district? What
We
is the
did
role
for
of staff?
every
What is the role, so doing beliefs is really important as well. Any additional thoughts for board goals, district goals, the evaluation process?
In terms of the evaluation, do we need actual, metrics? In order to foster a positive climate at board meetings, do we need to specify practically how that happens, or?
Well, typically you would write action plans to judge how that happens. I think the metric is watch the videos for the last, from January on, and we'll be able to tell, and so will everyone else. I'm not being funny. I mean, literally, it makes a real statement. Anyone can watch those. So, if this hasn't taken root, it'll be abundantly clear. And I promise you, if I'm here on June 20th, I will have looked at your board meetings between now and June.
And you'll know, right? You're going to have a new board member. And how do we onboard, right? We're going to do that new board member orientation, the same conversations we've been doing. And what was the third one? Support for the...
I'd support for the district strategic plan.
Thank you.
It's scribbly.
Didn't
I get too
well,
far
and I
down.
didn't bring any glasses. I can't see. Not for any amount of money in the world. But that you'll know, right? Because we'll have been having meetings. We'll have, a framework, if nothing else.
And you can also use and look at your agendas as well over the course of time to look for evidence. What are the things that we took action on that were a part of this, either from the board's perspective and or from the district goal perspective? You can look at your agendas for evidence and proof of work that was done between January, whatever date we are today, the 11th, and June 20th, or slightly there before.
I think that the biggest thing that everybody's going to be able to tell is if we're collaborating with one another. And a big way to tell that is if people start coming to meetings and grandstanding and reading tons of speeches. Of course, I have been one of those. So, you know, I don't blame anybody else. I've been a part of it as well. But if you don't work in committee with one another, if you don't have discussions with chairs of committees, if you don't talk to the superintendent, and then you save all your questions, and it's not that we shouldn't ask questions to each other at a public meeting, but we do go through an enormous amount of committee meetings and discussions with one another. And, you know, if there's a board member or a couple board members who decide that they don't want to talk to anybody anymore, or they don't want to engage with other board members, it's going to absolutely show at a board meeting, and all of us have seen it play out in public. So I guess what I'm hoping with the point of me suggesting this is that we try not to do that anymore, right? Like, we try to actually talk to each other. And I agree with the superintendent and with Ms. Thornton. We don't all have to agree with one another, but we have to come to a decision. And not everybody's going to get what they want, whatever that is, but you have to be able to compromise. And that's a big thing that I've seen haven't happened in quite some time, is that there isn't compromise. And that's the only way we're going to be able to do that with 9 people, because there isn't just one way. So I think it's a good idea for us to try to do that, because I think that's what our community wants. They don't want to see fireworks at meetings. Well, maybe they do, because they find it somewhat entertaining at home, but I think for the majority of it, most of the people who send their kids to our schools and come here, they're working, they have stuff to do. They don't need to see all the drama. They would rather our meetings be extremely boring and just know that we're all doing a good job and that we're all moving forward for the kids. So that's why I proposed it. I hope it happens. I mean, it's going to play out in public for everyone. So, I mean, that's the only thing I can suggest.
You all know you can do it. You did it when you did the superintendent search, and you all came together and you came to consensus. You didn't necessarily get your first choice, but everybody, and I'm not saying that's true, but you have to learn to work toward consensus. Find those shared pieces that you can agree on and work forward. I know you can do it. We did it when you did the superintendent search, and you found someone wonderful who was willing to come and work with this district and continue to move this district forward. You just have to keep that front and center and work together collaboratively and find those areas of shared agreement. Again, it won't be on everything, and you can agree to disagree, but do so civilly and do it around the issue, not around each other. I think everyone has gotten and let things get too personal and taking it too much to heart, and it's led to a lot of distrust and discord. And we know that those districts that have collaborative relationships among and between board members and between the board and the superintendent are districts that have higher levels of student achievement. And at the end of the day, that's why you're here, is to ensure that every child reaches his or her potential. And to do that, you have to focus on kids and not on adult stuff. Not on about he said, she said, we did, they did, he's up, he's down, she's up, she's out. That's not the purpose of a Board of Education. We can help. I'll come in and do training on parliamentary procedure, consensus building, team building. We're here to help support you be the best you can be. I've been working in Watchung for more than a decade. I've seen boards do well, and I've seen boards fight like cats and dogs. Believe me, board service is much more fun and much more effective when you work together. And that's not meant as a negative toward anyone, but it really is important. You have this opportunity. You have a new superintendent. You have information that you didn't have before that you now know we have marching orders of things that need to be addressed and taken care of to make it better. Focus on those. Focus on moving those forward. You passed a referendum. The community wanted it. You need to move forward with it. That's going to continue to happen, even though it's not a particular specific goal, because you have to keep working on it to get it done. But you have success getting those things accomplished. Focus on what you can do and how you can work together effectively. That's the most important piece. You know, if you listen to anything I've said tonight, think about it from that perspective. It's really important to continue to focus on what's good for all kids all the time, and not on this stuff that takes you off that focus around a singular issue or a singular point, or being unpleasant to one another. It's just not beneficial. Okay? Any other thoughts?
I want to add that we added,
Committee is where you get the work done and you can talk to each other and really express your ideas, and you should be able to do that civilly. I think that's the best place to be.
I would agree.
I want to add that we added the best superintendent on the planet. And she found the best BA on the planet, so we're in good shape.
No.
Now we just got to work together, support them, and sky's the limit.
Sky is the limit.
Should we add as number 4 the referendum as a conversation too? As a
No,
board vote?
I don't think you want to add that as a goal, because that's going to just continue, because those plans are already in place. So it's just a matter of moving it forward, and which you will continue. I mean, the regular operation of everything else, all the teaching and learning and professional development and all those things that are all other pieces not mentioned are all going to continue to happen and move forward.
Awesome.
The other thing I was just going to suggest, based on what Gwen gave us such extensive information on the social media situation, is that I think that that hurts our board too. And it's not necessarily board members going on social media and making comments. It can also be our spouses going on and making comments about board business, or, you know, other board members, and calling names and whatnot, because that's not going to help us work together. So when it comes back to you, even if you're not on social media, but you're finding out that, let's say, a board member's spouse is saying things, that's not going to create a great working environment for anybody up here. So I think that's something that we all have to be mindful of. And, you know, my best policy was, when I started way back, was to try to make sure I got off of all that stuff. I found it to be very distracting. And I felt like it kind of took my eyes off of the target of whatever it is that our board was working on. And it was all just kind of noise in the background. But lately, I guess, you know, the past couple years, that's what I've been seeing more of, is not necessarily board members going on, but their spouses going on and making really, you know, obscene and horrible comments about what's happening, and that's not going to help anybody up here. So, I mean, you know, if there's any way that that could be factored in, I think that would help all of us as well, especially if we're all trying to work together.
I would encourage all of you to use social media as little as possible, and that includes everyone's significant other, children, spouses, family members. Again, you know, it takes your focus away from what's important with kids. And I know we all have strong opinions and perspectives on things, and there's nothing wrong with that, but it belongs here at the board table among the board members. And the community can come and watch and observe and see. They can sit at home and watch and see. Hopefully tonight they've been doing that, and hearing your conversations, because I think they're important for the community to hear. that you care deeply about the work that you do and that you're committed to it and committed to working together as a team civilly and being respectful of others' opinions. And you're right, when there's negativity out there, it's sort of, it creates this sort of atmosphere that makes everything more difficult and challenging. And frankly, nobody needs that in their life, period, in any way, shape, or form. So I completely agree, Dory, that if that can be limited or reduced or ended, that would be helpful for the full board. Because you're all going to work together for the next 3 years, no matter what. Okay? Any closing thoughts, questions?
No questions. So shall I move on to the next thing?
Have I missed anything?
No, you covered everything. You got
Think I-
district goals was the last thing.
Okay, I think I covered everything on the agenda, I think.
Covered the evaluation of the superintendent. Yep, covered that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very
Thank you
much.
for having
Thank
me.
you.
Thank you for inviting me. It is really an honor and my pleasure to come in and work in Watchung, and I mean that sincerely.
Thank you so
You
much.
have a wonderful district, and you have had it, and you will continue to have it. You just want to take it to the next step up. You're right, you do have the best BA
Yeah,
as
we're in
superintendent.
good shape now, for
You
sure.
are.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you.
so much.
Thank
Ms.
you
Thornton.
I have
so much.
folders for you with lots of information, so I'm going to hand those out. You can take them home and read them at your leisure if you have nothing else to do, but you should read them anyway.
Thanks, Gwen.
You're welcome.
Okay, now we're going to move on from comments from the public. We welcome input from the public. There are 2 times during the meeting when the public is invited to speak. The first opportunity is to comment on agenda items only, is now. The second opportunity for the public to comment is towards the end of the meeting. Total allotted time for public comments is 30 minutes. Before you make your comments, please state your name, municipality of residence, and if you are representing an organization. In the event it appears the public comment portion of the meeting may exceed 30 minutes, the presiding officer may limit each statement made by the participant to 3 minutes of duration. Our public forums are not structured as requested and answered sessions, but rather as offered as an opportunity to share input to the board. In instances where the board feels a response is needed, the presiding officer or superintendent will address the comment. New Jersey statutes do not permit the board to discuss personnel or hiring in public sessions. Names of students should not be used. Members of the public should consider their comments in light of legal rights of those affected and identified in their comments, and to be aware that they are personally legally responsible for potential liability for comments they make in the board. The board shall not be held liable for comments made by any board members of the public. Seeing that there are no comments from the board, we'll move on to board business. From the public, we'll move on to board business. Any new business? Seeing that there is no new business, we'll move on to comments from the public again. Are there any comments from the public that are not on the agenda? Seeing that there are no comments from the public, may I have a motion to adjourn? All in favor?
Okay, you need a second.
Second.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Meeting adjourned.